Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they absolutely, unequivocally got it right. And this is Tom Navulis, your host, and I am so delighted that you are here with me on today's program. We have a lot to cover, and I'm probably going to go down a few different rabbit holes, but I just wanted to let everybody up in Northeast Ohio know that this weekend, which is Saturday and Sunday, we will be jamming it up at the two different wineries up in Northeast Ohio at Debonair. Here on Saturday, we'll be there starting at, was it noon till, or 1 o'clock till 6 o'clock, and then over at Grand River Cellars at let's see, I think that's about noon till 7. So, if you're up in Northeast Ohio and you want to get some good, delicious jams, go there. Otherwise, help support this program by going to Pepperlicious. That's Pepper dash licious.com and get your Christmas gifts there and pick up some really wonderful culinary experience jam. Or you can go and pick up a couple of my books there on Amazon so that you have Christmas gifts. I'm just letting if I don't self promote, nobody else is going to promote. At least I'm honest and straight up on it. So, what is happening in the mirrors of history? Wow, you're seeing it all week long, all these last months on the national front. We're getting the whole play of what I have talked about for years relative to Gramsci, relative to a number of the other socialists and communists, especially the Kozak Plan. Now, something that I want to bring out that I have on multiple programs, and so I'm not trying to beat the dead horse here, but no pundit out there is bringing it out. And I think that the president's PR people have toned him down on calling Schiff and Nadler and all of those others that are part of what? What are they? They are part of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. They're communist. Socialist, maybe, but what we're showing in great detail is that these people are communist. And through the deceptions of the educational system, especially at the college level, and now all the way down into grade school, communism and socialism is the predominant mindset instead of Christianity and patriotism. So, what we have and what we see is that the Kozak Plan, which clearly called for the enemy, which are the socialists and the communists, to get elected into those seats in Congress and in the Senate, so in the House and the Senate, and even at local levels in your states, in your different boards, especially your boards of education. What they have been able to do by virtue of getting elected and never challenged, which I'm going to talk about again out of Timothy Dwight's sermon. I'm still going to get that sermon, but we've been jamming it for the last 2 weeks, and I have not been able, because a sermon is something that, quite frankly, most of you will not be able to tolerate. Why, Tom? We listen to sermons, or you fall asleep during them. It's because it is longer than the 30 minutes, or in some churches, the 15 minutes that you get from the pulpit. When I did the word count on this thing, and with the fact that I'm trying to take and bring some of the words down to a third grade reading level, it is over an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, an hour and 20 minutes. For most people, the whole service, their church service, lasts over 45 minutes. They're like looking at the door trying to figure out how to get out. You know something? That's a major problem. And in our Founders Day, there was no question whatsoever that the people would be willing to hear from a pastor for over an hour just to hear the sermon. Okay? So it takes a while to go through this and make sure that I inject the definitions of the words that were commonly used, that were used by the commoner. Those people during our founding era were pretty stupid, and they did not know the English language. You gotta be kidding me. We're stupid. We're so lacking the knowledge and understanding of common words of the day that we have to have them defined and even dumbed down. So, with that, we just want to carry on with all the proceedings now that we're seeing, and then we're seeing that Mr. Horowitz, who was an Obama appointee, just that's that is the travesty right now. If you want to talk about the confusion and the mix-up and all of that within the Trump administration, it's because the Obama holdovers are just going berserk because they can't understand. And the Obama holdovers are all part of that what? Progressiveness. They're not progressing anything except taking us into socialism or potentially even communism, which our founders talked about, and which Samuel Adams said was, in fact, under the English Constitution of the day, even was utopianism, which is socialism, is unconstitutional, even under the old ideas of the English loosely fit Constitution, but even more so under our constitutional structure. But under the Kozak Plan, just remember, and again, I'll put it there for those who will go read the references. But the point is that under the Kozak Plan, the insidiousness of it was not only to get into the educational system, to get into the unions, to get into every public entity, but to get elected and have enough seats within that process to force others, to cajole others, to even take and put that type of pressure on the other Democrats, because we saw that there was a Democrat who said, no, she's not going to support impeachment, but the pressure was put on and she flipped. And then, old Jerry Nadler there, Jabba the Hutt. I'm sorry. You're not supposed to necessarily take and um, talk about people for different things. But honest to Pete, I saw a picture of him the other day, and the dude looked like he was sitting. He wasn't standing. When he puts his jacket on and stands, he's a very large man. But the way he was sitting, honest, it was like Jabba the Hutt. Now, we can take that image and move that image to the true identity of Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars and look at the evil, look at the domination that that entity wanted to have over everything. Look at how it rang out as judge, jury, as the sole arbiter of all things. Old Jabba, he was like pretty interesting there. But I think the one that was most funny is in that Mel Brooks movie Spaceballs, where Jabba the Hutt became what was that the pizza person. Anyway, all the fun images. You go check it out. I mean, go watch the movies and have some fun with it as well. But the point is that when people have been dumbed down to the extent that they're electing immoral people, when they're electing people that have no capacity to understand what it means to govern appropriately, and when we look at people that have no common sense, it brings us into many of the ideas and components of that sermon that was preached by Timothy Dwight. And what does it mean then to drive to public happiness? And that, when you look at what does it mean from a constitutional perspective, um, how does that work? So one of the things that our good pastor here, Timothy Dwight, brings out is that he's talking about piety, and piety also, the other exercises of virtue derive a higher distinction, are presented with stronger motives and enforced by more solemn sanctions than can spring from any other source. Same with morality, same with all of the other aspects of humanity, but at the same time, he recognizes that uh, under modern philosophy, under modern theory, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago, is that there's man's ideas. So that could be anything across a spectrum of whatever somebody dreams up. But the ultimate conclusion on all of that is that it perverts truth, especially God's truth. It perverts reality. It perverts everything that has been created in this world. So those are some of the things that Dr. Dwight was talking about. And he was talking about such things as being moral obligations, though real, must be of comparative little importance and operate with little force in relationship to this idea of piety. He also makes a note that is hard-hitting paragraph is what I talked about here in talking about modern humanism. All duties which we owe to mankind are without consideration of piety, viewed as merely due to men, worms of the dust, being of yesterday, and children of vanity and sin. To such beings, moral obligation, though real, must be of comparatively little importance and operate with little force. But in the eye of piety, all these duties are enhanced beyond measure by the consideration that they are enjoined by God, and that, of course, every fulfillment of moral obligation to our neighbor is performance of a duty to our Maker. The same remarks are, with equal force, applied to the duties of self government. So I'm going to stop right there and talk about that for a few minutes. One of the things that we're not doing and we're not teaching any longer, and you've heard me speak about this over and over, and this is this is related to those mirrors of history, is what is self-governance. And if you can't govern yourself, and then you have all of these other philosophies and ideas and theories of how government should work, contrary to the construct of our republic, then you don't have any grounding. You have no moral obligation to your neighbor because you have no sense of morality in and of yourself. And then there's that question of self governance. So when we look at the modern education system, we don't teach those kids self governance in schools. No, we teach them how to be tolerant of every insanity, every sin, every theory, every philosophy that's out there. Whereas if we were in a church, in a body of believers that maintained the biblical Reformation thoughts and teachings, it would be self governance. And you reject all of those other ideas and vain philosophies and theories that are out there. Yes, it is. It is that great spiritual battle. It is that idea of what does it mean to self-govern, and what does it mean through that idea of self-governance then to be able to interact in society, then to understand what it means in having a greater sense of happiness. And then we're going to talk about here in the next segment, what does it mean to govern and how does that work and what happens within the context of that legislature. Sam Adams understood all of this, as well as did the Anti-Federalists. So come on back in the next segment as we take another look at Sam Adams Returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they absolutely got it right, and just continues to get proven every time you do what? You watch TV, you listen to the radio, you take and look at whatever other internet source of media that trips your trigger, hopefully good stuff. But that, you know, we're sitting here knowing that as we read in general just the anti-federalist papers and those things about Sam Adams, that, you know something, they got it right. They predicted this very moment in time. And there's more of that happens on Liberty Works Radio Network. And I encourage you to go to those daily programs and look at the archives and listen to the other hosts and hostesses that are here on Liberty Works. And yes, I know, Tom. Yeah, so here was this thing. What was it? We had that goofy thing, which I never understand why they call it Black Friday. That makes no sense to me when all that's happening is a lot of green being spread around if you use that fake money, those bills, all of that type of stuff. Uh, and all it is green paper. So there you go. Then there's this other thing on a Cyber Monday. So then all your discounts. But then the one that gets me, and this is the one that I want to really push you on for the moment, Giving Tuesday. Well, you know what? Here it is, Saturday. So how about Giving Saturday? Go ahead and click on that donate button there at Liberty Works Radio Network and support this, your network, your listener-funded network. So I think that was interesting how it all comes in after Thanksgiving like that. So whatever. And we're sewing, not the SEW thingy, which is one of my favorite words of sew as I look over at Kat. Anyway, here's what Timothy Dwight had to say too, and we kind of finished up in the last segment was this idea of morality and moral obligation. And he goes, a clear and fixed sense of moral obligation is probably, in the opinion of most men, indispensably necessary to the discharge of the duties and the production of the happiness of society. But such a sense, it is presumed, is to be looked for in piety alone. The strength of moral obligation lies wholly in the conviction that a constant adherence to its obedience to the will of God, but almost all the regard which is rendered to God or to his will is rendered by the pious. Imperfect and desultory, which means a lacking of a plan or purpose or enthusiasm, feelings. So desultory feelings of this nature, so anything lacking a plan, which the feelings of this nature, feelings which are yet of no small importance, will generally be found where a religious education has given birth to just moral sentiments, and especially where general influence, united with public instruction, have cultivated such sentiments into habit. Beyond these limits, nothing can be expected. Nothing is commonly professed, and nothing will ever be found beside the changing power of fashionable opinion, the slippery dependence of personal honor, and the accidental coincidence of selfishness with duty. Wow, we can dissect that all week long in looking at everything that's happening both in local and state and especially in federal government. Where do people get their ideas of their moral justification to do what they're doing? Everything we're seeing under this social justice warrior insanity and the legislation with the unintended consequences that come from it in the federal level and then in the judiciary is absolutely contrary to anything that has any righteousness to it, any true morality to it, anything that is biblical in nature, anything that is self-governing in nature. Oh, but we're setting up a world that has moral determination that comes out of the UN. Really. Moral determination that comes out from a bunch of dictators, liars, jihadists, God haters, communists. That's our moral determination. And it crosses into the various major denominations as well as it does into those that are just pure, brain active atheists that have no desire to do anything except what suits their fancy. I got to jump away from this for a minute because as I was picking up off my desk, I was looking at something that I had in a program quite a while ago about who was Leighton Stratke. Stratke was at Cambridge, and they were there. His years there were happy and productive among the freshmen at Trinity College, and this was all in England. Stratke was a communist. He was a writer. He was a lot of different things. He associated with Clive Bell, Leonard Woolf, and Saxon Sidney Turner. And other undergraduates there were A.J. Robertson. These students formed a group called the Midnight Society, which in the opinion of Clive Bell was the source of the Bloomsbury group, which was a pretty ugly group. Um, Other close friends at Cambridge were Thoby Stevens and his sister Vanessa and Virginia Stevens, later Bell and Wolfe, respectively. I ain't going to go into all that one. Straczynski also belonged to the Conservationist Society at Cambridge, Apostles, to which Tennyson, Holman, Maurice, and Sterling had once belonged. The Apostles formulated an elitist doctrine of higher sodomy, which differentiated the homosexual acts of the intelligent from those of ordinary men. In these years, Strachey was highly prolific in writing verse. So I got to stop there and just push on for a minute. But, they took this homosexuality to this higher level, the intellectual homosexual, instead of just what you have with all the other confusing letters that are out there. And then the influencers. And then other men that influenced Stratke included G. Lowes Dickinson, John Maynard Keynes. He was that guy. That one of the biggest things he did, and maybe this is the Prince Andrew thing, is Keynes would go to North Africa so he could buy young boys and execute his perversions while he was there. Well, that at least they went to North Africa and they didn't trap. Well, they did. They trafficked in kids. They trafficked in women. But that's at that intellectual level. That's the higher intellectual. And so, what's the name of that guy that hung himself in his cell? Epstein. Epstein. Yeah, I wonder where that list is of who was all part of that. Anyway, you had Keynes, Walter Lamb, who's the brother of Henry Lamb, George Mallory, Bertrand Russell, G.E. Moore, and Moore's philosophy, with its assumption that the sum bonum lies in achieving a high quality of humanity and experiencing delectable states of mind and in intensifying experiences by contemplating great works of art was particularly an important influence. Where's the moral connection? Where is that moral continuity? Where is it that you have the intellectuals, and as Thomas Sowell always talks about in his book on, this intellectual elites, go look at what has happened in modern communism and the perversions that are there that are now norms, are the morality that he's talking about here that aren't God's morality. So as a result, you go into this slippery dependence of personal honor. Of personal honor. What honor do you have? What is not fashionable and fashionable opinion. Let's see here. Oh, climate change, all these other things that are happening, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next segment, because what we're finding and the what's happening out there, and we wonder why all these kids are committing suicide and so on and so forth. It is because we have introduced such confusion into the moral state of things that children have no longer an anchor of truth. And as a result, they become despaired. As a result, they're committing suicide. As a result, there is mental illnesses out there that are just running. The mental illness is because there's no moral continuity. And the great support of moral obligation in the present world is the belief of God's moral government, of our accountableness to Him, and of an approaching state of rewards and punishments. The desire of happiness and the dread of misery is a part of intelligent and even of the animal nature, and is inseparable from the faculty of perception. As all happiness and all misery are ultimately derived from the hand of God, and as no bounds can be set to the degree or the continuance of either besides those which He pleased to set, this object comes home to every heart with a power totally peculiar. Its efficacy, meaning its ability to produce results, reaches all places, times, and persons. All persons, I mean, besides the fool who hath said in his heart, there is no God. Its superior efficacy on men of piety, I have already explained, says Timothy Dwight. So we have so many out there, and we have in our educational system right now fools that lead education, fools that are on the boards of education, fools in the universities because they say there is no God. And as a result, they have no capacity whatsoever for moral obligations into society. So society isn't happy right now because they have no sense of a continuity of morality, of piety, of that truth. And it takes it into despair. The world goes into despair, it goes into depravity of man, is proclaimed in every law. It's engraved in every altar of every religion that does not hold to the biblical Reformation truths of God. And it is written with the pen of amendments on the iron page of history, how desirable it is, the motives, the duties, all that is there. You can see that it is twisted unless it comes under God. You can even see that with Israel. You see that with every nation that has first proclaimed God and then turns away from God. I just want to talk a little bit in the next segment on what it is for a legislator to have the right mindedness. Then I want to talk a little bit about two different articles that I saw this past week. And yeah, I read Breitbart. It was there, and there's an interesting article that I probably won't have time to get to that is from the Federalist, which I really like the Federalist. But the point is that we have all of this disorder, confusion, and everything that's going on out there and within our political system for two primary reasons at the moment. One, the majority now, it's being proven by the Pew polls and a number of other polls out there, that the church is waning, Christianity is waning. So then that means there's no, as I said earlier, no continuity in morality, to the extent then that how do you self-govern, let alone govern within anything that you're elected to, if you don't have that capacity to understand that, if you don't have piety in its true sense and meaning before God, you're not going to be able to have the understanding of what it is to self-govern. Sam Adams got it. The Anti-Federalists got it. They had it to such an extent that they warned us of this very day. They warned us of what is happening now. So come on back in the next segment. Sam Adams returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they did. They got it right. And this is Tom Navulis, your host, and I do want to welcome back everybody from Soaring Eagle Radio. And once again, thank you to Dr. Spalding for having me on down there in Lima, Ohio, and in that market. So good things, and keep on fighting. And we'll take and we'll work that cross section from northeast Ohio and down there and southwest Ohio. We'll start putting that compression pressure on, and we'll get things accomplished. But with that, I just wanted to take and talk about something here before I get into these articles, which I may or may not get in time because I may go down all these other paths as I usually do. I'm stuck on, Dr. Dwight's sermon here. But did you know? Yeah, let me do that again. I like that. Kath teases me about how I use my fingers and pointing at things. Did you know that there's a thing that's called common sense? Oh, I see that look on your face. Well, yeah, Tom, there's common sense. What are you talking about? Common sense. Really? Did you know that there's a thing called practical knowledge? Practical knowledge? Oh, yeah, that's when I put the widgets together. I can connect this wire to that wire, and I can put that gear onto this gear. That's practical knowledge. Really? So almost all knowledge and all practical knowledge is derived either from experience or from revelation. That's a biblical perspective of knowledge. Theories are generally mere dreams, which ought to be placed in the same level with the professed fictions of poets. It's like the weird person Linton Strachey. Yeah, theories and dreams. They ought to be put there in that same level as a poet, and to be written in verse and not in sober prose. Thought dignified with pompous title of philosophy, they have usually, after amusing the world a little time, gone down the stream of contempt into the ocean of oblivion. They cannot be practical because they cannot be true, and hence, being of no use except to please the imagination, they are of course neglected and forgotten. Well, that's except socialism, that's except for climate change, that's except for all that is pushed emotionally and is pleasing to the imagination because we have ripped God out of our society and we have instituted in every form, every level, even within the churches, man's philosophy. I heard this past week that I think it was the Buttigieg dude who's running as a Democrat for president. He was at some church, and there in the church, the pastor was talking all of these vain theories and philosophies. You know what? They touch on the imagination of the people. So you have this little girl that looks Satan, looks possessed, demon possessed to me when you look at her eyes, is that she's running around and she's the world spokesperson now for global what? Climate change. Well, here's one. All right, I got a segue before I get back to this human faculty called common sense. Oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? He has to preach about common sense because, well, you need to. It needs to be preached about. So here's this whole thing on climate change. Here's a professor in the UK and comes over here, and she also teaches in Rhode Island, and she's a 40-year-old senior lecturer in the English department at Brown University, is addressing the unease in a number of ways because the melting Arctic and communities are racing to maintain a life in the rising Pacific. Residents are sounding alarm bells. And in Rhode Island, this gal and her husband are not having a baby because of their fear, their consternation that the world is going to collapse. Really? You see the mental pressure that is being put on this, and she's getting kind of old to have kids anyway at 40 years old. I would think she should have thunk about having kids a little bit earlier in life. But the decision to not have children was not just about the concern for their future well-being amid environmental degradation, she explained, but also about not wanting my sense of responsibility to the world to shrink down to the size of one person. I think Dr. Dwight talked about that selfishness when you have these vain theories and ideologies and all of that out there, and you don't understand the context of the world in relationship to moral continuity within the framework of biblical Reformation truth. Wow. Wow. She also said that she's going to take her last flight on an airplane. And she said it was that troubled that people were treating her climate fears like a personal individual problem. She said she wanted to see if that was actually the cause. And so it goes in this article talking about climate anxiety counseling. She set up a sign out there on campus that said that climate anxiety, I can't even say it right. Climate anxiety counseling, because that's how stupid I think it is, 5 cents. The doctor is in. And it was a booth that she actually set up there in Providence so that people could talk about their fears. Shock of all shocks, Kat. People came around and were talking about all their fears and anxiety around climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, this is even being propagated within the churches to set these fears because of bad theology, because not understanding the foundational Reformation truths, the biblical truths that are there, of not having that clear understanding of the fundamentals of creation, of science. It just continuously blows my mind. Not really, because we know, as we said, vain philosophy, vain theology, that there's all of these anxieties. So you start taking, and that's being pushed down to these kids from preschool. Then you're taking and you're pushing on them this whole thing. What gender are you? Oh, because one person has, outward and the other one has inward. No, that's confused. It's whatever you feel like, whatever you want to be. No. God created us specifically. You can read it not just in Psalm 139, Psalm 139. Don't get hung up there. Go check out Isaiah. Go check out a couple of the other prophets. God created us. He knew us. He put into us the fundamentals of our personality and who we are, our talent base, while we were being shaped in our mother's womb. Period. End of story. But instead, these vain moralists, these perverted people in education and everything else are taking and destroying our generations. They're destroying our humanity. And for what reason? So they can dominate, so that they can control, so that they can turn people away from God instead of to God, which is the responsibility of the legislature, quite frankly, is not to turn them away from God, but to turn people to God and to legislate and to take and be honorable before God. So let's see. All right, there's another one here that about the medical system, which I'll just put a reference there. I think it was very, very interesting, but I don't have time to get into it. What I got? 8 minutes, Kath? 5 minutes. All right. So within this next 5 minutes, let's jump back over here. This common sense thing. Oh, what is common sense? It's a human mind, a faculty. In this, there is in the human mind a faculty called common sense, which, though never in high estimation among philosophers, there it is. There it is. With all of these intelligentsia, common sense is not existent. So, in the estimation among philosophers, seems to have originated and execute almost all the plans of human business which have proved to be of any use. The reason is obvious. Employed in forming near and evident deductions from facts and in closely observing facts for that purpose, contented with moderate advances and cautions of innovation, its step, though slow, has been sure, a real approximation to the end in the view. Theory, on the contrary, rapid but wild, has usually receded more than it advances. And it means receded more than it advances. Untried causes, socialism, communism fail all the time. Causes to which a new application is given and experiments in business, made either anew or in new circumstances, have always been regarded by common sense with a suspicious eye. And a state of things not perfectly desirable, willingly endured in preference to the adoption of new systems of which the effects were uncertain and the operation dangerous. If you use common sense with that heartfelt intuition, you've got to question some of the wackadoodle stuff out there. So, just because of the American DNA, which I cloned back in 1980, I came up with, that's okay, all the pundits can say it. Yeah, because of the American DNA, what we have going on is that some people can just use basic common sense and say, Mr. Shifty Shift and Mr. Jabba Nadler, uh, common sense alone will tell you that they're evil and that they are duping the people. Oh, let's see. So I got to get moving on because we only have a little over 2 minutes left. So the effects of knowledge, thus defined throughout this whole sermon, is that are evidently of high importance to social happiness. Okay, so we have to have real knowledge. The legislator, it will enable to understand the state, the interests, and the duties of a people, to form regulations suited to their state, promotive of their interests, and coinciding with their duty to discern with a freedom from low and pernicious prejudices that equitable government is the true source of honor to himself and prosperity to his people. To cast his eyes abroad without the purblind confusion of narrow minds, and to see clearly the real conditions of other nations and their proper connection with the affairs of his own, to look back with distinctiveness and with comprehension on the past state of human society, and forward with rational predictions to events which are rising on the surface of futurity. In a word, placed by such knowledge on a lofty summit, he stands as a watchman for the welfare of millions, unobstructed by mist and undazzled by the height to which he is elevated. With a steady eye, mark distinctly the surrounding progress of things, and it is enabled with confidence and with safety to utter alike the quieting voice of peace and the timely alarm of danger. Thank you, Donald Trump, because he gets it. He fits in here. He has effective understanding of knowledge as defined within the sermon. So come on back. go think about it. Go read the sermon again. Yes, I am going to be able to put it out here to you on video within the next week or two. I'm still not finished dumbing down the words for a lot of folks out there. But Sam Adams understood the language of the day, and so did the Anti-Federalists. But more importantly, they understood that God was supreme over all. Come on back next week.